Good morning. This is Randy's rant, but also Randy's requiem for a man. You know, Don McLean wrote a song called "Bye Bye Miss American Pie," and it says that I can't remember if I cried when I read about his widowed wife, but something touched me deep inside the day that the music died, and so that sort of starts out my commentary on George Floyd. Tomorrow is George Floyd Day. I wonder what he did on May the 24th, 2020. We often don't know what awaits us, but what did George Floyd do that day? The mundane things that he probably took for granted. We can't, any of us, not remember the little girl that said, "My daddy changed the world." Well, bless her heart, her dad did change the world. But not like Martin Luther King changed the world. But he did change the world. George Floyd revealed a fear that a whole race has endured since 1619 to 2021, now that we have the Green murder, which sadly, appears to make George Floyd look like had a bad day. It said Dr. King always kept a copy of the Howard Thurman's Jesus and the Disinherited. The fact that he had this book at all times in his brief drew me immediately to read. The book, after 40 pages, is probably one of the most important books I've read. Listen to the fear that George Floyd felt on May the 25th, 2020. Firstly, what is fear, according to Thurman? Fear is one of the persistent hounds of hell that dog the footsteps of the poor, the dispossessed, and the disinherited. Violence, according to Thurman, precipitate and stark, is the sire of the fear of such people. It is spawned by the perpetual threat of violence everywhere. Of course, physical violence is the most obvious cause. But here, it is important to point out a particular kind of physical violence, or its counterpart, is evidenced. It is the violence that is devoid of the element of contest. It is what is feared by the rabbit that cannot ultimately escape the hounds. One can almost see the desperation creep into the quivering, pulsing body of the frightened animal. It is one-sided violence. If two men equally matched, or evenly relatively matched, or in deadly combat, the violence is clear-cut, though terrible. There is gross equality of advantage. But when the power and the tools of violence are on one side, the fact that there is no available and recognized protection from violence makes the resulting fear deeply terrifying. If you have listened to these words that I've shared with you from Dr. Thurman, and I would say to you, if you don't have this book, you certainly need to go out and get this very small book that is a wealth of knowledge from my perspective, just my perspective, but a wealth of knowledge for a Christian roadmap. This man's philosophy, ideologies were what gave Dr. King the ability, power, courage to do what he did. Forget about all of the fancy, to do what he did. And for those of you who don't know one thing about Dr. King, he was a voracious reader and taker in of knowledge and wisdom, and he understood the faith of all men was what we were searching for in belief in our fellow man. So this is sort of not a sad moment in the nation, but the nation and the world is on stage on May the 25th, 2021. Lets us know that on May the 25th, 2020, we were in the middle of a raging pandemic. We had George Floyd emerge through that. And quite honestly, we had a presidential election that was headed for rebellion. So much has transpired since May the 25th, 2020. I hope that this experience that happened to Mr. Floyd on that day continues to cause us to search, think, do whatever there is to have a better society, a better people. Because, where we are right now today on May the 24th, 2021, our way of life is in peril because a political party has now become the party of insurrection. And there's no way around it. The process of democracy is a participatory process. And for us not to have a Republican Party that realizes that our participation is a combined effort, especially around humanitarian, basic human rights issues like police reform and the right for a free citizen to exercise his right to vote and not have that vote disenfranchised because of your possible doubt with absolutely no proof of anything wrong. What is probably wrong is that the Republican Party questions truth, and that is the monotony and the paradox of everything that we're involved in today in America. And that is why on May the 24th, 2021, those of us who are African American realize that George Floyd was the tip of the iceberg when we look at what has happened to Mr. Green a year before Mr. Floyd. Is inexcusable and breaks your heart as an American that somehow your own country is out to get you, is for lack of better words, in a simple way. I mostly do this now, I realize, because someday, somewhere, possibly, maybe my grandchildren will listen to this and wonder, well, what did you do? What was Grandpa doing? And they'll know. Grandpa probably won't have left you a dime, but I will have left you my heartfelt feelings and beliefs. And possibly by that time, I don't know what they'll do with Facebook, but I'm sure it'll be archived somewhere. But I really wanted more than this Randy's Rant podcast. I really wanted it sort of these statements put away for the posterity of time. I see so much of that little girl, George Floyd's daughter, in our own children, in our own grands, and I'm sure most of you do as well. So that really is what drives this more than the inequity and the hostility and the horror of how black people have been dealt with by our law enforcement. But more than anything, as George Floyd was a symbol, that little girl is also a symbol too. For what, I'm not quite sure. I mean, we can wonder about it, but it doesn't go without saying that my daddy changed the world is what this child had already resolved after her father had been brutally murdered, and she knew about it. And she took solace in the fact that my daddy changed the world. And I suppose, sweetheart, he changed the world just like Dr. King did and gave the ultimate sacrifice, his life. This is Boomer, Randy LaFall, May the 24th, 2020, a message from Mr. George Floyd, a requiem for a man's life and death. Peace.